They all laughed, my parents, my cousins, even my aunt who barely knows me. They actually laughed. At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister Emily raised her glass and said, "Here's to family except for Hannah, the failure who thinks money makes her worth something." And they laughed. Like it was just a harmless joke. Like I hadn't paid for the wine they were sipping or the food on their plates. I didn't laugh. I raised my own glass and said, "To the failure who just stopped paying for everything you own." And that was the moment the room went silent. For years, I tried to buy peace, to earn love with generosity, to stay quiet and useful. But that night, something broke. Or maybe something finally healed. And what followed wasn't revenge, it was truth, finally unburdened. This is the story of what came after that toast. Growing up, I learned early that silence was safer. Emily was the loud one, sparkling, unpredictable, the center of every room. I was the shadow trailing behind her shine. While she sang at talent shows and brought home boyfriends like trophies, I stayed in my room reading books about astrophysics and building basic web apps before I even hit high school. My parents didn't ignore me, not exactly. But praise was always reserved for Emily. She was our wildflower, our bright spirit, the one who lives life to the fullest. I was so responsible, so mature, which in our house really meant not needing anything. By 16, I had a part-time job and my own savings account. At 19, I was living off freelance contracts, while Emily bounced between majors and partied her way through a 6-year college experience she never finished. Still, whenever she stumbled, there was always a net to catch her, usually funded by me. I remember one Thanksgiving when Emily showed up unannounced with her then-boyfriend, a man who insulted me within 5 minutes of arrival. My mother rushed to set an extra place at the table for them. No one noticed I hadn't spoken a word all dinner. Later that night, I paid the rent she forgot to send that month, quietly, because she just needed a little time to get her photography business going. I never expected a thank you, but I guess I always hoped for acknowledgement, a pause, a look that said, "You matter too." It never came. Instead, there were jokes, little barbs tucked into casual comments. "Don't work yourself into an early grave, hon." Or, "Money doesn't buy happiness, you know." One year, Emily gave me a mug that said CEO of being lonely. She thought it was hilarious. I kept showing up. Kept giving. Holidays, birthdays, medical bills, broken down cars, even a down payment for Emily's first condo. The title somehow ended up in her name alone. I told myself, this is what family does. But deep down I knew. I wasn't family in the way Emily was. I was the safety net beneath them all. Reliable, replaceable, unseen. So when Emily lifted her glass at that Thanksgiving dinner and said those words, "Except for Hannah," it wasn't the insult that broke me. It was the clarity. Everything I'd ignored, justified, endured, it snapped into focus. And I knew right then, I wasn't going to be their silent benefactor anymore. You'd be surprised how much people forget when they're not the ones paying. The condo Emily bought in her late 20s, that was my money. She'd been denied a mortgage due to poor credit and asked if I could just help get her started. I paid the down payment and signed the guarantor line. She moved in, posted Instagram tours with blessed, thriving captions, and never mentioned my name once. When Dad slipped a disc and needed surgery that insurance didn't fully cover, I paid the difference without hesitation. When Mom's car broke down and she didn't want to burden Dad again, I sent her a check the same day. I paid off Emily's final semester tuition, not because I thought she'd finish, but because she'd threatened to just give up and move in with me. I figured paying was easier than living together. Birthdays, anniversaries, Mother's Day, Father's Day. I sent flowers, gift cards, new appliances. When Emily forgot Dad's birthday one year, I had a custom leather watch delivered with both their initials engraved. He thought it was from her. She didn't correct him. Neither did I. There was even a time when Emily was between jobs and Mom called me, voice trembling. "She's just going through a rough patch, sweetheart. Could you maybe float her a little something for rent?" I wired, 2-0 that night. I kept a spreadsheet not because I needed the numbers, but because it helped me stay grounded. When guilt crept in and whispered, "Maybe you're being too cold," I'd open that file and see just how much I'd quietly carried. Over 7 years. 18, 400 in rent and utilities. 11, 200 in medical bills. 9, 700 in business investments that went nowhere. 6, 500 in car repairs. 4, 0 in vacation and holiday expenses. 1, 0 in last-minute bailouts and forgotten bills. Not on C did anyone ask if I was okay, if I needed help, if I even wanted to keep giving. And every time I showed up, someone, usually Emily, would find a way to make me feel like it wasn't enough, or it was somehow transactional. "Hannah's not the emotional type," she once said at dinner. "She just sends money." They all laughed. They always laughed. But the truth was, I didn't send money because I lacked feeling. I sent it because I was raised to believe that love meant giving, that responsibility meant silence, that success meant sacrifice. Until that Thanksgiving night. Until the toast that sliced through every buried resentment like a blade. Until I realized I wasn't the problem. I was the funding source. And I was done. Thanksgiving was always a production in our family, Emily's favorite holiday. She loved the photos, the matching outfits, the performative grace around the table. This year, she insisted we rent out a farmhouse-style restaurant just outside town, for the vibe. She picked the theme, the wine, even the playlist. She didn't pick the person footing the bill. That was me. I'd called ahead a week before, gave the venue my card to hold the private room. I didn't announce it. I never did. I told myself I was doing it for Mom, who'd spent her life trying to hold the family together, and maybe even for Dad, who'd aged faster than he realized. I wasn't doing it for Emily. She showed up late, of course. Hair styled to perfection, wearing a velvet dress I recognized from a shopping spree she claimed she couldn't afford. Everyone rose to hug her. I stayed seated. Dinner was full of small talk and shallow laughter. Ryan, our cousin, told a story about getting lost in Rome. Uncle Ben chimed in with a golf anecdote no one asked for. I sipped my wine slowly, counting how many glasses Emily had already emptied. Then came dessert. The lights dimmed. Someone brought out a pie with candles. A few people clapped. That's when Emily stood. She raised her glass, eyes gleaming. "Here's to family," she said, voice warm and rehearsed. "To shared memories, unconditional love, and being there for one another, no matter what." She paused, just long enough. "Except for Hannah, of course," she added with a crooked smile. "The failure who thinks money makes her worth something." Laughter. Not gasps, not awkward silence. Laughter. Dad chuckled under his breath. Mom tried to scold Emily with her eyes but didn't say a word. A few cousins looked down, clearly uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. It was strangely quiet inside me, like the moment before a power outage. I stood. Lifted my glass of water because I don't drink much around them. I need to stay clear. And I said calmly, "To the failure who just stopped paying for everything you own." The table froze. Silverware paused midair. A wine glass tilted but didn't fall. I smiled faintly. "Starting tonight, the car insurance, the condo bills, the family health fund, even this dinner off my books." I nodded toward the door, where the restaurant manager stood discreetly with a bill folder in hand. "That one's on you, Emily." She blinked. Dad sat up straighter. Mom whispered, "Hannah," like I was the one making a scene. But I wasn't making a scene. I was drawing a line. And this time, I wasn't erasing it. The dinner ended without dessert. The staff cleared plates in a rush, their polite smiles brittle. No one made eye contact. My parents avoided looking at me. Emily stormed out first, heels stabbing the hardwood like punctuation. The rest trickled out, whispering, avoiding the obvious. I waited until everyone left. Then I paid the bill. Yes, I still covered it. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed that night to end clean. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of calling me petty or cruel. I was ending the role I'd been cast in, not adopting another version of it. By the time I got home, my phone was already lighting up. Text from Dad. That wasn't fair, Hannah. You blindsided everyone. Not how we handle things in this family. Voicemail from Mom. Sweetheart, Emily was joking. Please don't let one comment ruin decades of love. We'll talk tomorrow, just you and me. Lunch, okay? 3 texts from Emily. You seriously embarrassed me. Grow up. You're not a victim. Hope your money keeps you warm. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet, the one with every payment, every bailout, every silent sacrifice. It wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. Truth, quantified. And I emailed it. Subject line. In case you forgot. Attachment. Ledger. 20 LSLSX. No body text, just numbers. 49, 800 over 7 years. Broken down by category: medical, housing, education, family events, emergencies. 3 hours later, Emily replied. Wow, you really are that insecure. Congrats. You want a medal? I closed the message without reading further. Mom called again the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. Hannah, this isn't like you. You're hurt, I get it. But don't make permanent decisions over something said in the moment. That's not who you are. But the truth was, this was who I had become. Or maybe, finally, who I'd stopped pretending not to be. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was done. Done justifying their behavior. Done accepting crumbs and being called ungrateful. Done swallowing words to keep the peace that never included me. The backlash didn't end there. Emily's boyfriend messaged me on Instagram 2 days later, accusing me of trying to humiliate her in front of the family. I didn't even know he followed me. Then came the final straw. A shared bank account I'd opened years ago to help Mom with household expenses suddenly showed unusual withdrawals. Grocery store, spa appointment. A boutique clothing store I recognized from Emily's favorites. I froze. They were still using me. Even after the toast. Even after the spreadsheet. I shut down the account that night. And that's when I realized I hadn't made a scene at Thanksgiving. They had. I'd simply refused to play along this time. A week passed. I didn't answer calls. I didn't explain. I simply disappeared from their group chats like I'd never belonged there in the first place. The silence felt strange at first, like I was holding my breath. But eventually, it felt like oxygen. Then the envelope came. Plain, cream-colored, wedged halfway through my mail slot. No return address, just my name in shaky black ink. The handwriting was familiar. My father's. I hesitated before opening it. Inside, a printed stack of emails, some photocopied statements, and a handwritten note clipped to the front. It read, Hannah, we've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. But you need to know what's going on. I didn't know where else to turn. Dad. That line, didn't know where else to turn, rattled me more than the toast ever had. I flipped through the first document, a joint checking account in my parents' names. Over the past 2 years, it had been steadily drained. 1, 200 here, 2, 800 there, nearly every transaction marked E. Carson. Emily. Some were ATM withdrawals, others were PayPal transfers. A few were labeled emergency expenses, but matched boutique purchases and weekend getaways I'd seen posted on her stories. The amounts weren't just large, they were consistent, predictable. The next page was an email exchange between my dad and their financial advisor. We may need to refinance the house if this keeps up. I didn't realize how far behind we were. I've tried talking to Emily. She says she's handling it. But Hannah can't know. She's done enough already. That sentence stopped me cold. She's done enough already. It was the closest thing I'd ever gotten to an acknowledgement. And it wasn't even said to me. It was buried in a thread of desperation. They were losing the house. The home I grew up in, the one they always bragged about owning outright, was leveraged to support Emily's lifestyle. Not because she needed it, but because she expected it. And they let her. Over and over. And now they were at the end of the rope. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the folder spread across the table, tea gone cold beside me, and my hands clenched in my lap. This wasn't just about a toast anymore. It was about a pattern, one that had drained more than my wallet had drained my self-worth, quietly, over years. But now I had clarity. And leverage. And a choice to make. I could walk away completely, leave them to face the fallout alone. Or, I could use what I knew to protect them. Not for them. For me. Because if I didn't break the cycle here, it would keep spinning long after I was gone. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Marissa Adlersharp, direct, no nonsense. She'd helped a friend of mine set up a trust fund after a messy divorce. I explained everything, the hidden withdrawals, the equity drain, the silence, the toast. I expected her to be shocked. She wasn't. What you're describing, she said, tapping her pen, isn't just financial abuse. It's learned, dependency-enabled, funded, and emotionally manipulated. And you? You're the structure they've been standing on. I blinked. Structure. That word stayed with me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want control. I wanted to stop being the thing holding everything up because they never once looked down to check if I was still standing. So we created a plan. Step 1. I'd purchase the family home at market value through a private trust, removing it from further risk of foreclosure or equity loss. Step 2. The trust would grant my parents lifetime residence, but only them. If they tried to transfer rights to Emily or take loans against it again, the trust would automatically freeze. Step 3. I'd clear their existing debts using a portion of my investment income, but with full documentation, signatures, and legal restrictions. No more informal favors. No more blurry lines. Emily was not part of the deal. Marissa drafted everything in under a week. I transferred the funds the next day. When the paperwork was ready, I sent a formal letter to my parents explaining the terms short, clear, and unemotional. You will not lose your home. You will be protected, but not in control. This is not a punishment. It is a boundary. Dad didn't respond. Mom called 3 times. I didn't answer. Emily sent a text that simply said, "You've lost your mind." I didn't reply, because for the first time in my life, I hadn't lost myself trying to protect them. I'd protected myself too. Later that week, the documents were signed quietly, without ceremony. My parents sat across from me in Marissa's office. They looked older, not angry, just tired. Mom whispered, "Thank you," as she slid the final page forward. I nodded. No hugs, no forgiveness, just formality. Emily didn't show up. I never expected her to. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and the final deed in hand. The weight wasn't gone, but it had shifted. It no longer lived in my chest. It lived in contracts, in clarity, in distance. I wasn't the structure anymore. I was the architect now. And everything that came next, I'd be the one to design it. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Cold wind, gray sky, the kind of day that makes everything feel heavier. The knock on my door was sharp, 3 quick hits, like punctuation. I looked through the peephole and wasn't surprised. Emily. No makeup, hoodie too big for her frame, hair in a messy knot that looked less effortless and more forgotten. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here for answers. I opened the door halfway. "Emily." She didn't smile. "We need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in, without waiting for an invitation, same as always. Same assumption that space was hers, until told otherwise. She stood in my living room, arms folded. "So that's it? You just buy the house? Cut everyone out?" I stayed silent. "Do you even realize what this makes you look like?" she snapped. Like some controlling villain who thinks she can fix everything with money. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not fixing anything. I'm protecting what you kept breaking. Her mouth tightened. I didn't know about Dad taking out loans against the house, she said. That wasn't me. I walked to the coffee table, picked up the folder, and dropped it in front of her. Page 4. Transfers labeled under your name. Thousands. Regularly. Don't insult me with denial. She didn't touch the folder. Just stared at it like it might explode. You could have told me, she said, quieter now. I did. Every time I bailed you out, every time I paid your rent or covered your credit cards. You didn't hear me because I never raised my voice. That's on me. I should have shouted. Emily crossed her arms tighter, retreating into defense. So what? You're done with me? Just like that? I paused. No, I said. You were done with me. The moment you stood up in front of our entire family and mocked me like a punchline, that was your line in the sand. She shook her head. It was a joke. I stepped closer. It was the truth, Emily. Yours. Loud and clear. Her eyes glistened, but not with apology, with resentment. So what now? You get to play savior while I get pushed off a cliff? No, I said simply. You get to start from the ground. Like I did. Like adults do. She stared at me, disbelief mixing with something else, fear. You're really cutting me off. I nodded. Not out of spite. Out of survival. Emily's voice cracked. What do I even have left? I looked her dead in the eyes. Whatever you choose to build. She turned then, no dramatic slam of the door, no parting insult. Just quiet footsteps and a single breath before she vanished down the hallway. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt after she left. I felt peace. 2 weeks after Emily walked out of my apartment, the paperwork was finalized. The house was officially transferred into the trust. My parents signed every page with tired eyes and trembling hands. There were no speeches, no reconciliations. Just signatures, silence, and a distant kind of gratitude. When Mom handed me the last signed page, she didn't meet my eyes. You didn't have to do this, she murmured. I looked at her, steady. No, I didn't. I left shortly after, letting Marissa finish the handover. I didn't want a moment of false closeness. I wanted boundaries, real ones, legal ones. Ones that couldn't be laughed off at dinner tables, or rewritten by guilt. I set up a modest monthly stipend for my parents, enough for essentials, not indulgence. The trust was airtight. If Emily ever tried to access it, the funds would freeze. I even arranged for an independent trustee to manage distributions, so I could step back completely. Control wasn't my goal. Distance was. 3 weeks later, Emily moved in with a friend on the other side of town. I heard through a cousin that she'd tried working as a retail stylist, but quit after 5 shifts. The manager was condescending, she reportedly said. Classic Emily. I didn't follow up. I didn't check in. I didn't owe that anymore. That Christmas, a card arrived from my mother. Just a plain white envelope, no gifts, no notes tucked inside, just a single sentence. We didn't deserve your grace, but thank you anyway. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I simply placed it in the folder next to the financial documents, the one that had once held everything that broke me. Now it held things that reminded me I'd survived. And then I went for a walk. The sky was gray, cold pressing against my cheeks, but I felt light. I walked past storefronts dressed in garlands, families shopping, couples laughing, and I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, my calendar wasn't centered around other people's needs. There was no secret Venmo payment I'd have to send, no passive-aggressive call waiting, no emotional ambush disguised as a family lunch. Just quiet. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. But it was mine. In the months that followed, I stopped sharing updates with my family. I stopped sending gifts just because. I built something new, a routine, a space, a life that didn't orbit their approval. We still speak, sometimes. Short calls, polite check-ins, birthdays, no more barbed jokes, no more unspoken debts, just civility. It's not closeness, but it's peace. And peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It's not applause or validation, or being invited to sit at someone else's table. It's building your own table, and choosing carefully who gets a chair. Emily doesn't have one. Not out of cruelty. But because she burned hers? And when people say, "But she's your sister," I nod. Then I say, "And I was hers, until I wasn't." I've stopped trying to prove my worth to people who need me to stay small in order to feel big. I'm not the failure. I'm the foundation they leaned on too long. And now I'm no longer holding them up. I'm standing tall. For me,